It is within this framework that we have decided as government that this is not an acceptable situation and that Kenyans should not be subjected to a situation that we are facing today. In fact, in my mind, this situation can only be equated to deliberate effort to sabotage this economy, which constitutes a capital crime in our statute books. I can confirm that the country has adequate stocks of petroleum and petroleum products. We have determined that some players have been holding this product, presumably and probably speculating that on this day of the month, the 14th, as you all know, price reviews will provide them with a cash windfall. This speculative behavior is not only a demonstration of bad faith, but in fact is insensitive to the mandate of the operators. Some players have additionally been diverting cargo earmarked for local use for export into the region to further enhance abnormal profits, really. There has not been even a question of increased demand on the other side. It is therefore regrettable in many ways that we are in this situation, which we had hoped would self-correct because of the measures that we have been taking. That this has not been the case, we are forced to act in order not to plunge this nation into an energy crisis. Therefore, conscious of the above context, I wish to inform as follows. One, that this government will not tolerate any entity or person that is causing distress, either by creating an artificial problem or stress. And in this regard, I wish to indicate any entity that is not ready, that is not able, that is not willing to work within the framework of the laws of Kenya is invited to vacate this market promptly. The Energy and Petroleum Regulatory Authority, EPRA, has so far issued show cause letters to those OMCs that failed to meet the required minimum operational stock levels, thus resulting in stock outs at their respective retail stations. It is noteworthy that the energy minimum operational stock regulations of 2008 require the maintenance of a specific stock requirement that guarantees the country security of supply, and therefore it is criminal offense not to maintain such stock. It has also been noted that during the stress period, some oil marketing companies and retail station operators were offering petroleum for sale at prices above the published maximum price in breach of Section 99(1)(n) of the Petroleum Act of 2019. Consequently, EPRA has issued further show cause letters to all those companies and persons, and any other person, whoever is found in breach. I can assure you that we will take stern action against those persons and entities. The Ministry of Petroleum and Mining has filed the requisite complaints with the sector regulator, Competition Authority, and we have also approached state security agencies so that we can track and assess the level of culpability, if any. Let me make it clear here and now that we are going to follow this process to its logical conclusion. Kenyans have come from tough times, experiences the consequences of COVID-19. We are all trying to recover from its ravages, and we will not accept another layer of artificial constraints placed upon us. We will therefore go the full hog to bring all persons, all entities that are in breach of their licensing and operating guidelines to book, because we will not allow any disruption to the extent we have seen to this point. To place the country back to a path of normalcy, we have instituted the following measures. One, the ministry has sanctioned, I have sanctioned a process of reallocating the petroleum import capacity. The oil marketing companies who sold above their normal local quota during the crisis period will benefit from additional capacity, while those who sold less will have their respective capacities reduced. The rationalization of the petroleum import capacity sharing is aimed at creating a healthy balance between transit and local volumes. Second, we are taking measures to privilege the movement of fuel so that we can stock up across the country. In this regard, we are going to allow the movement of tankers on a privileged basis starting later today. And we hope that we can do this in the next 72 hours to stabilize the supply across the country. The movement of the fuel will be strictly in fidelity with the approved dispatch and merit order to all oil marketing companies. In this regard, I'm also calling upon all the retailing outlets to operate on a 24-hour basis so that we do not have Kenyans waking up in the middle of the night to go and try to fuel. In this regard, we are in touch with the Ministry of Interior and have arranged for the provision of security both for the movement of the freight as well as for the retailing outlets. Later in the day, the Inspector General will provide the full details in terms of securing that entire infrastructure from the depots to the last mile. Let me touch on the question of subsidy, which seems to have been the trigger point for this so-called crisis. A critical issue of debate and disputation has been the fuel stabilization program. I can confirm that as today, the ministry is in receipt of the full outstanding balance of the money that is payable to the oil marketing companies. As at yesterday, we had dispatched upwards of 34.6 billion since the program started last year, and as I've indicated, we will continue to disburse the outstanding money once we have done with the administrative changes. Now, this fuel stabilization framework has enabled the pump price in Kenya to remain the lowest in the region. Again, I wish to disabuse the notion that in this country we are having higher prices. That is not the case. And let me just give you some figures. At the pump price today for Kenya, our super petrol, the gazetted price is 134.72 per litre. Our neighbors, Tanzania is at 144.72, Uganda 163.20, Rwanda 154.81, further south, South Africa 172.26, Zambia 175.42. For diesel, even as IPRA, according to the law today, goes on in the review, in the consideration of the pricing review, I have no doubt that we shall still continue to have the cheapest pump prices across all the categories. And this because the government will continue implementing the petroleum pump price stabilization program in order to continue cushioning customers against the otherwise high pump prices. If we didn't do that, today a Kenyan would have to pay 175 Kenya shillings out of the pump. Some people have queried the essence of this program. And yet, we have seen around the world that governments must intervene when there is an absolute shock, as there has been, in order to ensure both security and affordability. And this is why we are doing this as an administration. I therefore urge the oil marketing companies, the retail stations, and consumers to also play their part. May I reiterate where the point I began with, that the country is sufficiently stocked with petroleum products, that our importation process and schedule has not been affected, and that in fact we have quantities that would last us up to the end of June without any issues. I therefore can confirm, even as we stand now, before some of the ships dock, we have 18 days of super petrol reserves. We have more than 20 days of diesel reserves. We have 11 days of dual-purpose kerosene in reserve. So there is no cause for panic whatsoever. That is why it is really disappointing that some actors chose self over the country and prioritized, in some cases, transit supply over local, thereby tilting the normal local to transit ratio, which should be 60 local, 40 transit. As a result, there has been the anxiety that we have witnessed, which should not take us into the Easter weekend. I urge Kenyans as well, as I did last week, to desist from making extra-normal bulk purchases of petroleum at this time. Let us await for the system to recalibrate and to normalize, since that increased demand creates a false constraint on the infrastructure, and it leads to disruptions. There is more than sufficient supply to meet our normal demand, and there can never be enough supply to meet hoarding. Please, there can never be enough supply to meet hoarding that we have witnessed in the last few days and the anxiety. The government will not abdicate on its solemn duty to secure the nation and to bring anyone or any corporation that undermines our national interest to accountability. We must. As a medium-term intervention, because we are looking beyond this situation, we have commenced a process of ensuring that the National Oil Corporation of Kenya, NOC, assumes its rightful responsibility of taking up the right quota for strategic reserve to secure this country from hostage-taking. We have seen that that is possible, and we must avoid it for the future. So I look forward to working along this path in the medium term. I reiterate that there is no need for panic, and I want to really wish every Kenyan normalcy. I believe that in the next 72 hours, we should have returned to the normal supply and demand cycle. And I want to take this opportunity as well to wish all of us good, blessed Easter holidays. And I want to believe that the red light on anyone's fuel tank will not be blinking soon. I thank you for your kind attention. I am happy to take any questions, and with me is the PS, is the regulator, is the MD NOC, and is the PS Energy. So I have my full complement here to take any questions.
Yes, ma'am.
Can somebody help me to moderate?
Thank you very much. My name is Julian Sambogo from NTV. Two very quick questions. First is, what is the prescribed timeline for settling subsidy arrears? And why I ask the question is because there is the pervasive view that there is misalignment between the time the government is paying oil receipts and their inventory cycle, and therefore you're throwing them into cash flow problems. Could you please give us a sense of that? Secondly, you have spoken very optimistically about the subsidy, and yet I have the CS Treasury on record going forward, this is likely to be sustainable, indicating that they could be paying upwards of 15 billion shillings every month in subsidy. If you look at the average right now, it's going to about 7 billion shillings, that's double. Could you please just clarify how you see this being sustainable in the long run?
We'll take the payment schedule. Does anyone else wish to ask a question so we can take a couple?
My name is Omondi from Keep FM, and I have a question on hoarding. You have accused the private firms of hoarding petroleum products, yet the very firm that is owned by the government, National Oil, has equally been experiencing shortage when it comes to the supply of petroleum products. Is it a case of you guys speaking on both sides of the mouth? Where is the problem actually?
Okay. There's only one side. Brenda, I can't hear you. Come closer. It's not on. Okay, all right.
You paid about 34.6 billion to the oil marketers. So how much do you owe them at the moment? And then number two, could you also give us an update in relation to the Ruby CEO situation? And then number three, are these players that you're talking about that are facing some form of punishment? Who are they? Could you give us the names, please? At the same time, when you're talking about this subsidy, will it be a partial subsidy or a full subsidy? Thank you.
I think we should take those first, eh? And I'll allow the PS, who is the accounting officer, to answer to Julian in terms of the cycle of payments. Huh? But let me just answer Omondi in terms of me speaking from both sides of the mouth. Usually I'm not very good at that. One, we are not speculating, okay? We are not speculating. We know how much fuel lands. We know who has what allocation. We know who has disbursed what. So we are not thumb-sucking here. Huh? And so we are able to determine who has dispatched what amount to the market. So there is no speculation here. And I am speaking this with very firm backing of facts and figures. So we do know. I can tell you who has dispatched what amount, where, when, you know. And so when I talk about hoarding, I mean it in its real English meaning, i.e., not releasing the product in the line of the structured arrangements of the licensing and framework of operations in the market. Huh? So, and National Oil can speak for themselves in terms of how much they have dispatched or received. On the question of sustainability of subsidy, let me just touch on that. You will know the history of subsidy is that it is deployed in a situation of an unforeseen circumstance, which is this type of situation. And it is not a petroleum subsidy. We've seen subsidies in various other formats. During the COVID-19 situation, you know, there was a range of subsidies that the government provided for in order to cushion the country. And this is the essence of it. So there is no subsidy in the world that I know that is ad infinitum. It is intended for a specific purpose, to relieve stress and to get people back on their feet without necessarily the negative, the unanticipated consequences of hikes that have been brought by unforeseen circumstances. So I do not see that this subsidy would be forever and that it would be a recurrent cost on the government. But we calculated as an administration and determined that it was necessary at a certain point, and that is why it was established. But I will give PS a chance to speak to the cycle of processing the subsidy. PS, together with how much you have paid up to now. Okay. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Waziri. I think there's been a lot of discussion about whether there is some kind of disparity between the way we pay the subsidy and the pricing cycle. There is no such disparity. I think, Julians, you and I spoke about this 2 weeks ago, and the assertion was from the oil majors and from the oil companies that they were experiencing financial problems, so they were not able to supply. And we paid them the very next day. Unfortunately, because we took them at their word, we said that the product would be in the tanks by Thursday. This did not happen. Clearly, there was another motive to tread water, looking, as the CS has said, towards a price change from EPRA today. So clearly that was not the issue. If it was the issue, then we would not have been having this press conference. Yeah? But there is no, for example, like the CS have said, we've paid 34 billion. We currently owe them 14, which we have received from the National Treasury, and we will pay. But don't forget, this money does not belong to me or to Waziri. It's your money, which we must take care of, and we must make sure that it is well audited, the numbers are known before we can pay. So, EPRA will announce the results today, the price today. At that stage, we will then know what is the amount that will be paid in subsidy. But don't forget, they have not sold a single liter yet. Yet they know what it will be, but we have to make sure that all the numbers stack up. And it can take, a month, depending on whether there's budget or there's no budget. And in government, you cannot spend money, even you have it in the account, without a budget. And you think you saw the president signed the supplementary one budget. So these are the kind of things that we have to take care of for you and generally the citizens at large. Our responsibility is to you, the Kenyans, and not to the oil company. So I think we need to separate those two issues. Was there anything?
I think Brenda also asked me to clarify, to update on CEO Ruby. There is no update. The CEO Ruby departed the country last night. Yes.
My first question to you was why has it taken this long for the government to react to this issue has been happening as far out as the western part of Kenya, coming with this going and reaction. So 20 days, I think it's a long time for the government to react to this. The second question is, what sort of punishments will these oil marketing companies receive if you do not find the showcase levels satisfactory to what you want to answer? And also, how was it established that Ruby's and all these other oil marketing companies were actually holding the field? How was it established that they were holding the field? And in terms of how much fuel they're selling outside the country, which was meant for Kenya, how much was it? The 60% sold out outside the country.
Good afternoon. Let's open the question to PS Samuel, and I'll try to put some context to it. First, the question is, should we expect at least a fair reflection of the prices here? I'm not trying to preempt the review that will come later, but should we expect a fair reflection of the prices we have in Kenya versus Tanzania? And on the same note, has the application of the subsidy been a stretch too far? And given the context here, we saw the release of the development levy just in September 2021 to the 5 shillings and 40 cents. And of course, the corrections have been happening. The subsidy was first applied in March 2021, from what I have, and it's been in application since. But we've seen those margins stretch a bit too far. Just going by the last review, 20 shillings on petrol, that's what the subsidy is covering. If the correction is only 5 shillings, would you say that perhaps the trigger factor that we are discussing here today, there was a bit of a stretch to find out of how that subsidy was applied? Thank you.
You can speak to that, yeah? Look at this. Okay.
I'm John from the business station. My questions are two. One, we saw the figure which the government was keen to report the government what the government that this CEO Now, Ruby is not the only farm that has been accused of hoarding. Are you likely to see the government move for other farms? The other guys involved with the same leader. That is just an isolated case. And then number two is the issue regarding the NOC. NOC was formed to detect the need and avoiding such instances like we are in now. But it's been underfunded. And basically, we can say it's a lack of a better one, not even an organization. So is this just another sweet song for the government or using NOC, or is something that is going to happen considering the checker issues we are having?
Okay, maybe we can take those and then we'll have a final round. And I will let the PS speak to Muiruri's question of subsidy and levy. Then maybe Kipto will also speak to that, EPRA. Let me speak to the question from Faiza. How long, why has it taken this long? When I began this briefing, I actually outlined the series of action that has been going on. So the idea that this is the first action is actually not wrong. This is not right. This is the tail end. We've done a lot. In fact, in the last 2 weeks, we've spent more time on this question than any other question in the petroleum and mining docket. So it is not exactly true that nothing has been happening, and I've detailed. Those meetings I'm talking about have been, in some cases, we've taken 3-4 meetings. Today, I started the first meeting at 6 o'clock this morning on this matter. So there has not been a delay, In fact, we had been anticipating that because of that intense engagement, the whole situation could self-correct. Because you can hear there was discussions, there was agreement of what to do, a lot of things that somehow did not come up to, which is why we suspect that the idea was to hold to the 14th in anticipation because of a speculative situation. But just to disabuse you. Now, what punishment? That punishment will be determined by the framework of the law, really. I cannot tell you what we will do with so and so and so and so and so and so. It depends on what we find on the scale of the determination of the offense, if at all. So that will be determined not by me, but by the facts in hand, okay? Again, how has this been established? I really want to tell you people that there is a very elaborate and robust system. So the idea, there is no gaming here. There is no thumb sucking. Some people are saying, even somebody this morning sent a message to me and say, we hear that some people have to side talk each other to be paid subsidy. There is nothing like that. So there is a really very elaborate system that we are following and that will continue to be followed. Now, on the observation of business daily about vigorous, I think every government should be very vigorous at every point. So if you feel that we have acted quickly, it should be like that, and it will continue being like that. So watch this space, okay?
Thanks, Waziri. Maybe I can take the question about the subsidy and when it started. Maybe I can correct you. The subsidy was, the Petroleum Development Levy, 5 shillings was added in June 2020 and not September 2021. So it had been going on for more than a year before we started. It went through the normal parliamentary system, and then it became gazetted in June. So that's the first thing. So we were collecting the money way before we had to pay any kind of subsidy in April 2021. I mean, this is the kind of foresight that you need. I mean, there's been a lot of discussion, why don't you remove it? And then it will reduce the price. As the CS has said, the difference between the price that people should be paying and what they're actually paying is 30 shillings. The 5 shillings just does not cut it. So it's like an insurance plan. You keep paying a little bit. When you go to hospital, the insurance pays back what it was. So this is exactly what went on. So I think from a sustainable point of view, we cannot say that it will be 15 billion because we don't know what the oil prices will be tomorrow. And that's what the stabilization program is there about, is to cushion Kenyans against adverse price movement. We don't know what that could be, but we are here to do it. I think just a quick one on how do we know that companies were hoarding. KPC have constantly told us that there is oil in the tank, but you don't see it. You're queuing up for it. That in itself is self-evident that it's clearly not in the petrol station. So whoever owns it, because the government does not own a single liter of fuel, somebody has it and is not giving it to you. That is the classic definition of hoarding. It doesn't get simpler than that. So I think I'll ask the regulator to speak more about this.
Thank you, PS. Members of the Fourth Estate, I just want to emphasize on 2 points. The first point is on the question of how do you know? And I think the PS has alluded to this. How do we know what stocks are in the country, at what particular time, and who owns title to that product? As Madam CS has said, any importer of product into this country, any wholesaler, any retailer, any transporter are licensed by us, the authority. We then also know what stock of product is moving from one point to the other in our system. So we do know who is holding what product. So that talks to the question of hoarding. We know who is entitled to what product. Where is it sitting? Is it sitting in their depot? Is it sitting in the KPC system? How much product have they dispensed to their retailers? And that now takes me to the second question in terms of who are we looking at? And I think, as Madam CS has said, this is a discussion that is live. We, as the regulator, are working with also other government security agencies to see which levers. And as Madam CS has said, we as a regulator, and I just want to give an assurance that we are governed by the rule of law and will pursue the course of the law to this logical conclusion. In terms of licensing, I just want to touch on that. Everybody who is an importer, who's a wholesaler, who's a retailer, who's a transporter, is issued with a license from the authority. That license has conditions and is also pegged on the requirements of the Petroleum Act. So there are several levers in terms of sanctions that we may be taking going forward, but I don't want to go into the detail as to who are we speaking to, who are looking into, because that's a live conversation. Thank you.
Okay, maybe the final round.
My name is Edwin.
Okay.
You didn't answer the Brenda's question of who you are targeting, but maybe that is too much.